We are back, Catholic Champion Show. Your host, John Yep, and my co-host, partner in crime, partner in truth, Michael Hichborn. On the docket today, we have all things talking about Kamala skipping the L. Harris dinner for the first time since 1984. The other candidate has skipped it. And secondly, we're going to be talking all about where the women in this country stand right now with regards to the election and as it relates to abortion. So it's a big show coming up. We'll see you in a bit. The Al Smith dinner, traditional since 1945. It was Cardinal Spellman who inaugurated this dinner, started the tradition. And it was, of course, Michael could probably do a better job with history, but it was Al Smith who was the first major candidate to be nominated as a Catholic to a major political party in 1928 election. He's also governor of New York 4 times and rose from poverty to those places of high office. So Cardinal Spellman in 45 started it. By 1960, it was basically a staple in American politics, kind of the last time that two politicians are together before the big day. And Kamala decides to skip it this year. Thoughts on that, Michael?
Well, it's interesting that she decided not to participate in the in that particular dinner. It's as you pointed out, it's historically a very it's a tradition in American politics at this point. You know, it's as traditional as the Emmys. You know, having a roast at the Emmys, and usually both candidates take lighthearted pot shots at each other. It's not political pot shots, but mostly something that has been said or done in the news about the individual that you can make a little joke about. And by and large, it's never been mean-spirited. It's always just been like a roast, a good old-fashioned roast. And for Kamala Harris to just say, hey, I'm not going to participate in this and back away, what she's saying really is, I don't want to help the Catholic Church raise any funds for their Catholic charitable organizations, and I don't want to participate in this great American pastime. And so she's eschewing the Catholic Church. She's pulling away from a traditional American pastime, and it's, I don't know. I think honestly, it's done out of fear more than anything else, because she just knows that she can't stand she wouldn't be able to withstand the roast.
Probably it is also she's just naturally awkward in social situations, and that would just be put on full display, this late in the ballgame with the election season, and she's probably shying away from that. It probably also comes from just a place of genuine hate for Catholics. I mean, we already know that, where policy is what she's done. Look what she did to our friend David Daleiden, right? Who exposed all the Planned Parenthood with his videos. When she was Attorney General in California, she absolutely went after him. And he's still paying the consequences since that moment. So there's a lot there. Trump's going to be there. But one thing I was reading the history of this, Michael, and I thought it was interesting going back through the different election years and looking at the different candidates who showed up with the respective cardinal. Again, it's put on by the Archdiocese of New York. As Michael, you mentioned, the funds do go to Catholic charities. I don't think the actual charities organization, right? Like that, the famous one?
Catholic charitable organizations, a whole host of them that take care of kids.
Okay. So in 1996 and 2004, Cardinal John O'Connor of New York, who did a lot for the pro-life movement, I was actually at the first Eucharistic procession that he decided to do outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, just to show reverence for the Eucharist, bring it out to the public. A good man in many ways, and he did not invite in those 2 years, 96 and 2004. They didn't have the front runner candidates there. Now the rumor is, maybe you got insight in there here, Michael, but it's because of back then Bill Clinton's stances on abortion, and then Al Gore in 2004. Yeah, and that's interesting because the role of the cardinal basically saying, no, I'm not even going to be at the table. I'm not going to dialogue with you. I'm not going to walk the synodal way with you and have dinner with you if you're basically going at such a fundamental point of natural law. So that was I thought that was interesting. I mean, interesting if Cardinal Dolan would do something similar, or at least make a statement to that regard to, in some ways, both candidates on where they stand on Catholic issues.
Right. Well, when I was working for American Life League back in 2012, one of the campaigns that we initiated was a call for Cardinal Dolan to disinvite Barack Obama from the Al Smith dinner.
Wow.
And the reason we did that, and we used the precedent set by Cardinal O'Connor in the previous election cycles, talking about Al Gore and Clinton. We used that as a precedent to say, the cardinal has every opportunity to withdraw and to disinvite a political candidate, because you can't give a platform to somebody who is so completely opposed to Catholic moral and social teaching as those particular candidates are. And the fact of the matter is, Kamala Harris is far worse when it comes to her policy positions, stated policy positions. I mean, Obama's probably the same, but she's far worse in her stated policy positions than Obama ever was.
So what's the difference between Christ dining with tax collectors and Cardinal Dolan saying, or Cardinal O'Connor saying, no, I'm not going to, dine with you, Bill Clinton, back in the day? So who's more Christ-like, Dolan or Cardinal O'Connor?
Well, the question of being Christ-like, when our Lord dined with sinners, he wasn't having a fundraising dinner to schmooze with bigwigs to try and raise money for hospitals for sick kids and that kind of thing. Our Lord dined with sinners as an act of conversion. His whole purpose in dining with sinners was to say, when somebody approaches me with a contrite heart and a desire for conversion, then I won't deny them. That was his whole purpose. That's not what this is. And to try and equate the dinner that's essentially a fundraising campaign with what our Lord was doing is disgusting, quite honestly.
It's obviously very simplistic when I said that, who's more Christ-like.
But what you said is actually one of the canards that the left usually tosses in the face of people like us when we say you should not be giving a platform to these individuals because it's scandalous, not because we're trying to deny these people an act of conversion or a participation in the life of the church when they desire conversion, but because this is not the same thing. It's a false equivocation. And I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm saying that this is the canard that's being tossed at us.
Or maybe something that could be done, and I'm not extremely familiar off the top of my head, the format, the layout, how it goes in the evening with the dinner, but it might be a point because the goal here is to give a platform ultimately to truth, right? Truth being our Lord, right? So if the current cardinal, whoever it is, he at some point during the dinner gets up and addresses both candidates on where they stand on Catholic morality, why not? And use it as a way to show forth the veritatis splendor of our faith and point that out, right? Rather than just kind of like, schmoozing and whatever. So who knows? When we're on the Al Smith organizing team, Michael, one day, maybe we'll propose that as an option. But I think, that is the whole question, though, how to dialogue with people that are far from the faith, right?
Well, that is the essential question. The whole purpose of the Catholic Church is to draw souls to Christ. Everything else is supposed to be a support for that. The reason our Lord fed the multitude was to satisfy their bellies so that he could preach to them. The reason that our Lord healed the sick and healed the lame and all that kind of stuff, performed the miracles that he did, was to draw attention, to get their attention so that he could draw them to conversion. That was the whole point. It was also to show that he's God and that he has the ability to command anything in nature for whatever reason at any time. But ultimately, as Fulton Sheen said, if souls are not saved, then nothing is saved. And that's precisely why the church exists. So to your point, yes, absolutely. That's why we should be having a dialogue, but it's only efficacious if we are drawing souls to Christ. If you're not, then it's a fruitless exercise.
Speaking of dialogue, going on to our next topic, someone has just made a signal that they will be eliminating dialogue should they win. That is Vice President Kamala Harris. Was on Wisconsin Public Radio yesterday and got both sides of the aisle actually up in arms a bit. She declared that if she wins, she was going to eliminate the filibuster in the Senate with a specific intention so that the Senate would no longer have to wait for to have 60 votes. They could do it on a simple majority to be able to overturn Roe v. Wade. And people like Kirsten Sinema out of Arizona, who's classified as an independent, that's really true or not, but actually criticized Kamala open and said, no, you can't. This is a crazy idea because, and her rationale, of course, was if we reverse Roe, well, that also opens up the possibility that a future Congress could institute a national abortion ban in general, right? So, thoughts on eliminating the filibuster? Good idea or bad idea?
Well, let's start with the back and forth. They're definitely recognizing that it's a double-edged sword. If you do it for one, you can do it for both. And so that's a very interesting thing. But what Kamala Harris said in relation to this, it's not that she said we should eliminate the filibuster altogether. She said, and this is a direct quote, I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do. It starts with the qualification for Roe. So what she wants to do is not, or at least their stated position, is not to eliminate the filibuster altogether, but just to eliminate so that we can pass this one piece of legislation. Then we'll put it back into place. And it's such an absurd position that even her own constituency, her own people are saying, you can't say that. It's unconstitutional. It's completely contrary to the way that this government operates, because it is that ability for the minority leaders, the minority aspect of the House or the Senate, to stand up and say, we don't want this piece of legislation passed. And quite honestly, we need something like that because we don't want Congress making a ton of laws. That's why we have the government set up the way that we do, because we don't want them to have an easy ability to pass laws. That's how you create tyrannies. So you want to make it hard for them to pass a law. And the filibuster is absolutely one of those ways in order to make that happen. And for Kamala Harris to just stand up and say, well, we'll do away with it for this one particular instance, is a statement that I wish to be a dictator. I wish to be the one who establishes exactly what laws we're going to pass, when and how they're going to be passed. And we want to make sure that nobody's going to be able to stand in our way to do it.
The desire, the addiction for power, rather, the better way to say it, the addiction for power can become so strong that it's blinding, that it's willing to do absolutely whatever it has to do to achieve its end. It's the opposite of love in that sense, because she wants to break every single rule in many ways with the Constitution. And again, I'm not saying Kamala's tied to this with the assassination attempts. I'm not saying that at all. But whoever is behind those assassination attempts, and it is they, as Eric Trump said himself, there's this power desire that's so strong that they're willing to kill the front runner in the election, President Donald Trump, to achieve their end of some sort of a power, right? It's blind, and it's a hatred. And you can see it coming across with eliminating this filibuster, or setting term limits on the Supreme Court justices is another example of this, which could have devastating consequences, so that they could.
to that point, not just putting term limits on Supreme Court justices. What about what Biden said that he wanted to do, and start stacking the Supreme Court? In other words, not just, having 9 justices, but then adding a certain number of other justices, and having maybe 12, 15, 21 justices that he would then stack that court with all of those appointments before he left office. This was something he actually said he wanted to do. And
FDR did the same, right? He tried that and got slapped in the 1930s.
Right. Yep, he got slapped down. But this is why it's so dangerous to simply allow these people to bulldoze their way into office. And I mean, they are effective dictators, and they've made it very clear what they want to be is a dictator and not a duly elected leader.
Accuse the enemy of what you're doing yourself, right?
Yep.
Yep. Number 101, right? So that's what's going on now. I want to shift in the why of she's talking about this now. If this was such a hair-raising kind of proposal, why not just be quiet about it, shut up about it, and not say anything until the elections are over, right? There's obviously a method to the madness, and yes, it is madness. It all comes down to abortion, right? Abortion has become such a central theme of this campaign. And I got to be careful how I use that word here on this particular platform. But, the ending of human life, it's what everyone's talking about. It. The left has been using this so strongly right now, and they know that's their winning point. And obviously, who are the people that commit abortions? It's the women, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what, at least for me, I'm looking at what's going on in the news cycle, and it just keeps coming back to me. As you look at the different polls, I believe in 6 or 7 of the swing states, Trump is losing to women. Women have shifted, primarily suburban women, white women have shifted towards Kamala. And just teaming it up with abortion, I wanted to throw it at you, Michael, and just see what you might think is the reason behind all that. And then we'll get to the story specifically tied to that.
Well, any woman who's going to vote for Kamala Harris is going to do so simply because Kamala is promising to codify Roe versus Wade and make it the law of the land, which goes to show that we have these women are already Democrat to begin with. I don't think that this has to do with left, right, Republican, Democrat. I think it's just she's trying to rouse her support base. And the fact that there is an increase in women that are willing to vote for Kamala Harris over Trump has nothing to do with whether they're Democrat or Republican. It has everything to do with the fact that Kamala has made abortion a primary cause of her campaign. Can
you think about a worse reason, sorry to interrupt, just to be the primary impetus that you are trying to get voters to vote for you is
so that you can kill babies?
This is insane. It's a quasi religion.
Quasi? There's nothing quasi about it. I mean, the fact of the matter is that what we have is such a devotion to abortion. And the reason the Democrats, by the way, are so in the tank for abortion is because they recognize that there is a spiritual power to human sacrifice of children that allows them to have temporal power in this world. It's the bottom line for all history. If you look at all of these false religions, human sacrifice is the number one indicator of a desire for temporal power by any faction in the world. And it all has to do with that devotion to the king of power himself, Lucifer, the devil. I mean, the devil said to our Lord in the desert, if you bow down and worship me, all of these kingdoms are yours. Bow down and worship him. How does Lucifer wish to be worshiped? By human sacrifice, which is exactly what that Moloch ritual that takes place prior to birth is.
It's it makes complete sense. It's not even, the devil ultimately wants our soul. So if he's so interested in human sacrifice, yes, he's taken the human life, but in the process, the people behind that human sacrifice, such a grave evil that he's sequestering their soul almost in the process of that act. And historically, totally, that's spot on, Michael, there, pointing that out. I lived in Rome for 5 years, and I remember all the tours we used to do and just walking by the Colosseum. I mean, you have the Colosseum on one side, where saints like St. Ignatius of Antioch were killed. But on the hill right outside the Colosseum, people don't realize this, was a special area that the Romans had where they would just leave abandoned babies, babies that were unwanted, especially girls, right? Because they didn't have as much power and much clout back then. So
have you ever heard of the Ghosts of Tsavo?
No. What's that?
So the Ghosts of Tsavo is a true story. It took place in the 1800s. There was a place in Africa called Tsavo. There was a river, and they would leave the sick and infirm and babies at this river to be consumed by lions. Well, in the late 1800s, what happened was the British were building a railroad, and they brought in this engineer to work on this railroad, and he had a handful of men, and these lions came into the camp and started eating the men. They were dragging them away and killing them. And so this engineer hired a hunter, and they went out and they hunted these lions.
This is a movie. Is this a movie?
It was made into a movie, yes, but it's a true story. And what eventually happened, they got to the lion's cave, and in the cave they found mountains of human remains. And all of this, they called them the demons of Tsavo, the ghosts of Tsavo. And the bottom line is, when you conduct human sacrifice to this degree, you invite demons in. And the demons expose themselves in the form of these two lions. But imagine if we could visualize the demons that are being unleashed in this country alone by the very act of the taking of preborn children's lives, what would that look like to us in a very real and physical manner? It would be terrifying.
In other words, there are actions in say which invite the demonic into one's soul. It's not always intentional. It's by association, by action, right? You have, Ouija board for one thing, but pornography is another big thing that Father Ripper would say has a direct tie to the demonic, right, in the invitation. And shifting over, another historical example is, of course, Our Lady Guadalupe, right? It was the human sacrifice that were happening right there in Tenochtitlan on those pyramids, which prompted Our Lady to go in 1531, which I do not think it's by chance that on September 8th, when President Trump put forth the image of Mary on her birthday, seen by 70 million plus people, it was Our Lady Guadalupe, right?
Right. So, completely agree.
Audience needs to know this, but we had the chance to intersect with President Trump. I can't remember if I mentioned it here on the show last week, about 2 weeks ago, and we gave him just a thank you note, basically, for tweeting that out about our Blessed Mother and asking him again to thank you for what you're doing for life and to protect life at all stages. So I think she's got a role in this election. They see what's going behind. Speaking of human sacrifice, let's go to the details, where 68% to like 80% right now, they estimate, of abortions are done through this process in the country, are done in this way. That is through the abortion pill. Yeah. Yes, both sides of the aisle at this moment are basically in favor of it. We're going to fight tooth and nail everything we can do to eventually stop that because of the destruction of human lives. However, one side's obviously much more drastic. That's why we endorse President Trump. But one specific story that's been getting a lot of media attention is what happened in Georgia in the last week. And the details are as follows. Loss of Georgia mothers Amber Thurman and Candy Miller are a tragic example of the very real dangers of chemical abortion and a shameful manipulation of the facts undermine pro-life laws. You have two women. First one, Amber Thurman. She is the basic scenario is she is a single mother, although she's living with her boyfriend apparently. She is pregnant with twins. She lives in Georgia and she's pregnant, and she says, or her family says rather, that it was all the fear mongering that had made her think that Georgia would not allow her to get an abortion, so she had to cross state lines to go to North Carolina to get an abortion, right? So she goes over, crosses state lines. They prescribe her with the abortion pill, and she goes back home to Georgia, starts having complications, as is so typical of abortion pills. Even the FDA says that 1 in 25 people, women, not birthing people, women who have taken the abortion pill are going to have severe complications. Okay. Right. So I guess 1 of the 25, I think it's a lot more higher, but she had severe complications, goes to the hospital, goes to the ER. They do nothing. They sit on for 20 hours, don't prescribe the DNC, which would have removed the dead children and the tissue in the uterine wall. And long story short, she dies. They had
sepsis.
Sepsis, was how she died that way?
Yep.
Which is one of, I'm glad that's great, because that's actually one of the, I think the number one cause or symptoms that the FDA actually puts is what could happen with
the number one side effect. Yeah.
Side effect, right. Crazy stuff. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the obvious problem here is that well, there are two problems, right? On the one hand, you have the fearmongers who are out there sitting there saying that, well, if you have a miscarriage, if you have any kind of symptoms of a miscarriage, you're going to be prosecuted and thrown in jail because of these abortion bans. First of all, that's not what the abortion ban in Georgia does. It has nothing to do with that. But then they go on to say that anybody who performs a DNC now is going to be prosecuted because of this abortion ban. But again, the hospital administrators would know this. They know, and the doctors in the hospital know. They know that it's not illegal for them to perform a DNC on a woman who has a dead child within her womb. They know this. So they are absolutely complicit in this poor girl's death. But what these abortionists, the promoters and provocateurs on the left are trying to say is that it was the pro-lifers that caused this woman to die. It was the ban that caused this woman to die. No.
It was Donald Trump, they would say, right?
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, they definitely want to tag him in on this, but the bottom line is what caused this woman to die was the fact that she took an action to kill her own children. Let's start there. Secondly, the pill that she took, as we already mentioned, has as one of its side effects, one of the biggest, the action of sepsis. The fact that sepsis is a development that takes place as a result of this pill. And it's a big side effect. I think you said 1 in 25. Okay.
What they put on the official label of the box.
Right. So there you have the first part of the problem. So these people that were pushing that particular pill and say that it's somebody else's fault when somebody dies is a completely false narrative. Secondly, the fear-mongering regarding what's permitted after the fact. You're showing symptoms of a miscarriage. Therefore, they're going to prosecute. You need a DNC because your child is dead within your room. They're going to prosecute. That fear-mongering is what causes a delay in any kind of medical action that could be taken to save the woman's life. So they're guilty on 2 counts. They're guilty on 2 counts. This is their fault.
It is on them. And another point that needs to be mentioned here is, okay, for one thing, it's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump had nothing to do with this. This also predates the law that they're all balking about, predates Roe. Georgia already had a 6-week heartbeat bill in place before Roe.
Right.
So this had nothing to do with Roe. The overturning of Roe had nothing to do with Donald Trump. And so, although they're trying to use it to that point. And the second thing is she goes to North Carolina. What should happen before a woman takes these pills, which she should never do? Pro-lifers tried to put forth legislation that would require an ultrasound before and then afterwards. What happens if that woman would have gotten Amber, would have gotten an ultrasound to see her 2 little babies.
Right.
She, they could have seen the number one, that it was possibly an ectopic pregnancy. If it was an ectopic pregnancy, they never would have prescribed that pill. Okay. That would have, they would have had probably an operation right there to save the life of the mother. But that wasn't the case. Nor did they do one afterwards. So, and the other little tidbit of information that was interesting was when someone has twins and they ask for an abortion pill, they're given double the dose. The dose. She had taken double the dose of this stuff. So increasing the likelihood of a side effect. Just absolutely horrible stuff. But it's just the way that the left uses. It's so sick, the abortion pill. The facility, right? Go ahead.
Well, let's take it a step further. And, we've already pointed out how they are guilty in this young woman's death. But how much worse is it that they then turn around and blame someone else for a death for which they're guilty? They're using her death. They're using a death for which they themselves are guilty and turning around and wagging a finger at the rest of us. That's sick.
It is sick. And then the other case is Candy Miller, similar situation. She's also in Georgia, was pregnant, heard about the legislation in Georgia, or the fear mongering, not even the true legislation. But misinformation has deadly consequences. It is so important that people really, really choose their sources wisely.
But they accuse us of fake news, right?
It's unbelievable. I know, right? And they're freaking out. It's the blessing about this whole since 2020 and the whole COVID-19 crisis or pandemic has been the birth of independent media. Right. It's just blown away the traditional sources of propaganda. When you had Trump and Elon Musk go on X Spaces and get reposts, retweets, re-listens on near almost 1 billion people listening to it, that's the death knell for corporate media, right? It was controlled by, they all have ties to, to government ties, right? So it's like state-sponsored media in essence. So it's so important because this has consequences for people like now Candy Miller and Amber Rose and the 3 kids who were killed. Amber had 2 and Candy had another kid, right? So she heard the fear mongering, thought she couldn't go get a DNC after she had taken the abortion pill, and she died right there. Yeah.
So now 5 people are dead. 5 people are dead because of false narratives, because of the legalization of a drug that induces death, and because these people want to scare them into thinking that they can't do something that the law actually permits them to do.
They're dead, and the people around them who are scarred because they participated. The family lost their children, their grandchildren, or whatever. Yep. And then, like we referenced earlier, Michael, with the demonic acceptance by the act, which is brought in that area. It's devastating, and this is a hot issue. Again, some degree both sides support it. We're going to be working so hard because I really think that if the legislator, anybody in their right mind who saw what was going on with the abortion pill, what that's going to do, they can't truly be in favor of it, right? And it goes where, again, this election right now is about 2 choices. We are preserving the good, people, okay? President Trump and his agenda and his team are far better than the other side. As Trump said himself when he was talking about Kamala skipping the L. Harris dinner, what did he say? Any Catholic who votes for Kamala needs to have their head examined.
Yeah.
So true. So true.
Yep. Well, she's anti-Catholic. That's the bottom line. She's anti-Catholic. She's anti-life. She regularly goes after the Knights of Columbus. I mean, she even put together a litmus test saying that any judge that was put forward for nominated to take a judicial bench, she was asking them, grilling them. Are you a member of the Knights of Columbus? Do you have anything to do with the Knights of Columbus? Do you have insurance with the Knights of Columbus? And the reason is because the Knights of Columbus are well known for being pro-life. And to take that as a litmus test, a Catholic fraternity, and turn it into a litmus test just betrays the fact of how anti-Catholic she is.
Anti-Catholic, anti-American, anti-life, and her coworker, Tim Waltz, right? Students for Life is about to release on Fox News an incredible ad. I just watched it just before the show. It's about 20 seconds long. And it simply is, it's a dark screen and there's some words at the bottom that show up, but all you hear in the background is gasps of air. Okay. And over for about 20 seconds. Those gasps are from babies who are gasping for air as they're left to die after they have been born. Conspiracy? Am I talking crazy? No. That law exists in Tim Walz, Minnesota State, where at least 5 babies have died through that process. They've been born after the act, and they have been refused oxygen. I can't even imagine. One of my nieces, and that was one time I was in the room and I saw a children was just born, baby was just born, and the baby was not breathing right away. And we had to rush the baby over to get oxygen so that the baby could snap to it himself on his own. And that experience is, I can't apply that to this similar situation, man, to denying someone air. That's what these people are capable of doing. And you wonder why Michael and I are crazy enough to be like fighting our tooth and nail right now for this election. Everything's going on because this is what's at stake. Okay, we got to wake up, America. You got to get out and vote.
Yeah, the whole situation. I mean, dear God, who would not go to assist a little baby that was struggling to breathe? What kind of monster does that? I have no words. I mean, it's just the only word I have is monster.
I doubt that those Kamala or Tim would actually go into one of those rooms and watch it happen. There's a reason that
because
Hitler.
They're cowards.
They're cowards. Hitler rarely visited the concentration camps ever. Okay. Yep. He hung up in Berchtesgaden near his chalet and stayed there in the beauty, the false beauty, while he was doing all that evil. You stare evil in the face, you can't continue to do it. So it's serious what we got going on. That's why we are battling like we are. And I have a story about how Catholics for Catholics is battling. I wanted to share with and I actually haven't talked to you even on the side yet, Michael. Get your thoughts on this. So you'll be getting this in real time, Michael's reaction. As you know, and one of the many things that we are doing right now for this election season, we have like 6 major projects, but one of them is the St. Michael the Archangel billboard campaign. Again, it was an idea from one of you who watches the show, is a follower of Catholics for Catholics, and supporter, and said, hey, Trump's crazy enough to go back to Butler, Pennsylvania in October to make a statement that he's not afraid. We got to show that the divine protection is with him and that we're praying for him. So they said, why don't we get someone with St. Michael on it, protecting President Trump, and just have the words defend us in battle. Yeah. And great idea. We put 3 signs up in Butler. The idea has become so popular and the image so popular, by the way, that not only is it on 30 plus billboards across the country, but we're now making merch. I was literally texting with our coworkers right before this. We're going to have t-shirts available, yard signs, so that you can have this image, which it's all over social media. People love it. And it's iconic. And we'll have it in time, hopefully, for the Feast of St. Michael on Sunday. But the story is, we're going through these swing states. We're looking at the billboard companies. Thank God there are more than one. And one of the major ones, Lamar. And we proposed our artwork in Wisconsin. And we were dealing with one of the lower staff, lower employees. We had a contract countersigned in hand, which allowed us to have billboards in several locations in the Wisconsin area. I believe it was 5. And all was fine and dandy until like 2 days later. One of their higher execs, I won't mention his name, he came down and said, hey, you can't do this. This is not going to fit our whatever it was, our company regulations. We pushed back, respectfully said, excuse me, could you please clarify why an image? And Charles, maybe you could throw it on the screen if you get a chance. This is the image so people could see this and no worries. But the image had, and they said it amounted to, quote, a Catholic endorsement of Trump.
What do they care?
their care was, and we continue to push back, and they said, look, because of our standards that you can basically false advertising. They were saying that it's not right for us to appear to be the Catholic Church saying that that Donald Trump is the only option. Again, it's pretty obvious that we're in favor of Trump, but at the end of the day, it doesn't even say Trump saying, yeah, go ahead.
So from a logical standpoint, you put your logo on the front, Catholics for Catholics.
Right.
You put paid for by Catholics for Catholics. This is not the Catholic Church. Okay. And it's very obvious that it's not the Catholic Church. It doesn't say paid for by the Archdiocese of whatever. It doesn't say paid for by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. It says paid for by Catholics for Catholics. Your logo's on there. It's a corporate logo. So for them to say that this makes it look like it's an endorsement by the Catholic Church is nothing short of an excuse to not go through with an ad that they know is completely valid and legitimate.
It gets better. The billboard that we had requested to have the specific location, which was in Milwaukee, two sides to it. So they actually sent us the location, which happened to have the current vendors who were renting from Lamar. Okay. Well, the crazy thing was that on one side of it was an image rented by the Democrat National Party. So one side was going to have the Democrat and the other side was going to have our message, right? So here they were allowing that, and then they were disallowing this. Again, they're a private company, so they could in some way say, no, we can refuse service. But at the same time, you have to point out the irony of it. Like, who are they to say, you could chalk us up to a lot of stuff reading into this. Wisconsin is a swing state, okay? And not just a swing state, but it's the most Catholic of all the swing states at 26%. Right. So everybody knows that you're going to need that Catholic vote if you want to win that state, which is very important for the general election, right? So they were thwarting the message to get out to Catholics in that state, intentionally or not.
Well, okay, let's take it to another level and say you're not making an endorsement from what looks like the Catholic Church for a political candidate. What if you were to put a negative campaign out there and say Catholics cannot endorse or support Kamala Harris for any reason? And that was just the message. Would they then say, well, you sound like you're representing the Catholic Church? Or, but they couldn't. All you're doing is making a philosophical statement. So, there are ways to do this and to point out the inconsistency of their messaging. What about Catholics for Harris? Are they going to be allowed to put up billboards? Because their whole thing is, you're just Catholics for Catholics. You're not even Catholics for Trump. If they're making the argument that you can't make it sound like the Catholic Church is endorsing a candidate, well, what happens when Catholics for Harris decides that they want to put up advertising, whether in billboards or ads on TV or whatever it is? They put out an ad that makes it look like the Catholic Church is endorsing Kamala Harris, which is not true. Would they allow for something like that? I think that if you go negative and make it a philosophical argument, there's no way that they can deny you because you're not endorsing anything. You're just saying, hey, there's a philosophical argument here, a theological argument. Catholics cannot support Kamala Harris for X, Y, and Z reason. And there are so many, you just pick one.
There's the image right there. Look at that, everyone. That's one of our signs where we've been allowed to have it. And then below is the sign that they allowed. Okay. So we were going to be on the opposite side. Interesting dynamic there. I got to mention, people ask me, so do they have a right to cancel a contract? Well, there's legal debate about that. But they do have a clause in there which allows them to retroactively cancel a contract. But I'm going to read you the wording on that because that's very interesting. It's point number 6 on according to their contract. Lamar reserves the right to determine if copy and design are in good taste and within the moral standards of the individual communities. in which it is to be displayed. And they can reserve the right to reject any copy either before or after installation. So they can reject it based on if it's not in good taste or the moral standards of the individual communities. How about that? You could almost push back and say moral standards when half of the state supports Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you talking about? And let's
talk about your constituents alone. Catholics for Catholics. The people supporting Catholics for Catholics, who are they? They're Catholics. And who are they? They're supporting, the Republican Party. They're supporting Donald Trump. They're supporting conservative values. So if you want to say that this clause has to, from this clause that the ad has to represent your community, well, you can turn right around and say the people who support us are our community. We're not claiming to be the Catholic Church. And you can't say that we are trying to look like we're representing the Catholic Church when we're clearly a corporate logo. What if you were to remove just the seal that says Catholics for Catholics? Have CforC.com up there at the top.
They didn't even allow us to have CforC.com. We specifically asked, could we at least have our website on there? And they were like, no.
See, then they're being disingenuous. And I think that you probably have a case to bring a lawyer in on this and to have a conversation with their corporate lawyer.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that we can say there, and it's again, even if they have the right as a private company to refuse service,
but they're giving you an excuse, and now that they've given you an excuse, they're giving you an argument to have. They could have just said, "Hey, we don't want to support Trump. We don't want to have billboards that support Trump." If they had said that, then you wouldn't really have any recourse, because as a private company, they can refuse service on that basis alone. Okay.
There's good news to this story. There's a happy ending. The happy ending, we're not with Lamar at the moment. Again, Lamar up top, way up top, could be a great company. They've got a lot of good messages, but at least one of their execs can this. And we are asking Lamar to look into that situation. That's really where you guys stand. Okay, well, the people need to know this, first of all, that that's where you stand. That's your political affiliation. And we have the freedom, goes both ways, people, to take our business elsewhere. We have. That's why we're on 30-plus billboards in other parts of the country. The other part of the good news, happy ending of this, is the amount of attention that it's gotten, okay? Social media alone, blown up this image and this story. And we had also Jeffrey Lord from the American Spectator covered the story, and it was on the second largest Wisconsin radio station yesterday morning, and we've been invited to go on air on another one tomorrow with possibly some other outlets interviewing us. So people, we're using it. People are going to get the word out and know that this is what we're up against. These are big companies who don't like the Catholic message, and we need to speak up.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm really happy to hear that.
So stay tuned. We'll give you an update next week on where it is with this. Michael, give me your X post of the week. Surprise me. This is, again, where we each choose one social media post. It does not have to be X. Could be Instagram. Could be whatever. Hopefully not Snapchat. And then we each comment in real time what we think about how it matters with this current cultural situation. So what do you got?
So my X tweet of the week actually it goes back to our opening commentary where we were talking about Kamala Harris refusing to participate in the Al Smith dinner. And it's Cardinal Dolan talking about this particular incident, and what he says I found rather comical. So why don't we go ahead and roll that right now?
We're disappointed. We were looking forward to giving the vice president an enthusiastic welcome. And we were confident that she would find this. She speaks very much about the high ideals and how it's good to get away from division and come together in unity and all. That's what the Al Smith dinner is all about. We haven't given up yet. We're not used to this. We don't know how to handle it. This hasn't happened in 40 years since Walter Mondale turned down the invitation. And Remember, he lost 49 out of 50 states. I don't want to say there's a direct connection there. But so we're not used to this, and we're not giving up. You know who's been a help to us, Lauren, is Senator Schumer and Governor Hochul. They both are working hard to see that they convince her to come.
So there's still a chance.
Yeah, and Senator Schumer said to me, he said, I don't think she made the decision. I think her schedulers are saying she can't make it. So we're not giving up. We hope she's there.
See, this is what's funny about this. First of all, he points out that this hasn't happened in 40 years. And then he says it was Walter Mondale who was the one that decided not to participate in the Al Smith dinner, and he lost by 40 states. So, you know, when you look at this kind of thing, and the truth of the matter is, I mean, Kamala Harris is polling very poorly across the country. And she's also polling badly amongst Catholics. So when you look at what he says, you know, if she doesn't want to come, that's fine. She's probably going to lose like Walter Mondale did, but, you know, that's fine. Go ahead, you know, but we're hoping to get her in. But then he said it was her staff that probably refused to allow her to participate. Now, why do you suppose the staff would say, we don't want you to participate?
Her staff or her bosses?
Huh?
Her staff or her bosses?
Uh-huh.
In parentheses. Yeah, keep going.
Well, this, of course, goes hand in hand with the the message that came out yesterday that Kamala Harris might have an IQ of 80. And if that's the case, then I wouldn't want her up there on stage with Donald Trump either.
It's you know, for Dolan Cardinal, His Eminence Cardinal Dolan speak up like that. It's good. I mean, you want to bring people to the table, and I think, yeah, like you said, probably the staff who realizes is that, you know, this is going to
be a disaster.
Be a disaster. Now, it's interesting that Schumer is trying to force her to the table, literally, right?
Well, Schumer's been a long time participant in the Al Smith dinner. He's been, I mean, you can look at film of Schumer participating in the Al Smith dinner, I think 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So he's long been a part of this. So it doesn't surprise me that he would advocate for her to be there.
Interesting. Well, we'll see if she does. It's October 17th, so stay tuned. We'll see if she decides to show up and change her mind. X-Post of the week. Throw it up, Charles, what I chose for Michael to comment on. I'll read it here. So, and then show the part underneath it with the original post with the gentleman who tweeted that. I'll read General Flynn's. Jeremy is right. Politicals in Washington working on what are typically called CCOP, or it's mass casualties legislation, seems very out of this time. Why now and to what end? By the way, USG already has very detailed plans as well as funding for these events. What's going on? So basically what's happening is that individual there just pointed this out, as others on social media and news outlets are doing, is that for whatever reason, with everything that's going on, with all the important priorities we have right now in the United States Congress ahead of the election, we're wrapping up the end of a term, they're making it a joint effort, by the way, which is always concerning. It should catch your attention when you have Republicans and Democrats doing a kind of a joint legislation so they never agree, and to put in an actual amendment where legislators, similar to the way that when a senator dies or is removed from office, the governor names them, that they put on a list, a piece of paper, like 10 names that they choose, that they would give to their respective governor. I think it's 5 or 10 names for the governor to name should they die in office, right? It's referred to, you know, colloquially as the mass casualty situation scenario, right? So if a bunch of the congressional members suddenly die for whatever reason, that we have a system in place. Okay, prudence makes sense. You know, nothing bad about it. What was curious about it is the timing of it. Mm-hmm. All things happen for a reason in time. And I'll pause there. Michael, what do you think? Why the timing? Why now?
Well, I mean, when you're starting to talk about continuity of government in the event of mass deaths with regard to members of the federal government, that usually denotes some sort of intelligence that says that something is probably on the horizon. What that thing is, they're not telling. But given the rise in military tensions in the Middle East, given the rise of military tensions in many other places throughout the world, and especially given the fact that you have assassination threats against the former president of the United States,
Yes.
and current political candidate, they're signaling that there's something behind the scenes. There's something going on. They understand that there is an active threat to the members of the federal government. And I don't know. You don't do something like that unless you have some intelligence sparking the conversation.
These are weird times we're living in. I mean, again, this is off the heels of the gentleman from Maryland, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who said openly that if Trump wins the election, that is the job of the House to stop him from taking office in January. Does that sound familiar to what they were accusing us of 4 years ago? So they're openly saying that. These are congressmen, okay? I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes. We have to pray. These are weird times, like I said. I mean, look at the fact that there was a report that came out that Iran, surprise, surprise, is trying to kill President Trump. And there are numerous, attempts that are underway, that are originate from Iran. But at the same time, the Iranian president is at the UN getting protection by us. Yeah. It's crazy. A lot doesn't add up. So we're wrapping up and hitting the end of the show. Final thoughts, Michael, before I close?
Well, I mean, I think the number one thing that we talked about here had to do with the the Moloch ritual that takes place, and the attempts to the work to put an end to that kind of thing. And as Catholics, we have to recognize that is the power base of the entire left. They have no spiritual power without the ability to sacrifice children. So for us to work and fight for the overturning of any law that permits the sacrifice of children on the altar of Moloch, we're actually currently on the altar of convenience. I think that has to be our number one fight. We should be turning to Our Lady of Guadalupe. We should be turning to Our Lady under her many titles. I turn specifically to Our Lady of Victory, Our Lady of the Rosary. So her feast is coming up October 7th. So those are the things that we should be focusing on. I think that that is what will inform the rest of the political message and direction of this country if we can put an end to the sacrifice.
Here are your action items. Get a mass said for President Trump in America. First thing, if you want. Second thing, join our patriotic rosary every Sunday night, led by different Catholic priests with Jesse and Anita Romero. Third thing, get the voter guides, pass them out to everybody. They're going off the shelf. You can order them right in bulk, super cheap, right off our website. Fourth thing, make sure you register with us and you are a Catholic ballot chaser. You can help get 20 voters near you, Catholics with low propensity to actually vote. It comes down to that, okay? This always has to translate into action. And as Michael said about prayer, quoting the latest FBI whistleblower that just spoke on the House floor, I believe it was yesterday or even this morning, Marcus Allen. Yep. He gave a speech about what's going on and how did he close his message to America. He said some important things, but he closed it by saying, y'all should pray the rosary and attend First Friday devotions. How about that from an FBI whistleblower? We are in a spiritual war and need to be grounded in the sacraments so that we can fight peacefully and effectively. God bless you all. We'll see you next week.